Hey guys, it's me again. I figured that I wanted to make this video just because I know that like a lot of people have liked series like GGYGO's. He does a really good job, but like his is specifically how to hand trap, and I wanted to talk about like just hand traps versus board breakers and like tech cards like that in the current meta. Obviously, I don't think you're necessarily going to be playing these in like the Eldritch version going first, but if you're playing like the Utopia version or like the like the Magistus variant, these cards are going to be in going first, and like in the Eldritch variant you'll side in a lot of these going second, and it's important to just know how to play around a lot of these cards. So yeah, that's what I want to talk about. So we're going to get right into it. So first of all, as you can see, I got a lot of hand traps, tech cards, stuff that like we might be playing for side decking in here. So first of all, we're going to be talking about how to play around Infrib, Ash, and Valor. So these three are probably like, some of the more common hand traps. You can see I've got like Droll and Lancia on here. Lancia specifically, this does nothing to the deck, really, like, because like you want to be using Mycalais on your opponent's turn anyway, right? Because that's really Mycalais and then Magnifica once it comes out are the only things that banish. So you don't really care about anything other than that. Yeah. So that's just something there. So that's why I want to talk about those. So how you play around something like, we'll start with Imperm or Valor, because these basically do the same thing. The target and then negate. So say you have like a hand that is, we'll just say bottom this, and bottom this. But yeah, this works, I suppose. So how this basically works, right, is you can go normal Stella, but if your Stella gets Valored or Imperm, you kind of really don't have a play, but if you don't have packs, right? So like in a scenario like this, where you can go Stella and that's about it. But say, for example, if you have a Pax and you don't have a Sophia instead, you can go Stella and then like special summon any exosister you may have in your hand. If it does get Valored or Impermed, you could then go Pax and special summon the Ellis from deck, and you still get to make a rank 4. This is important in scenarios like where, say, you don't have Stella at all, right? And so you're like, you're trying to get into the Stella line. You really want to be able to use packs efficiently, and so that's why, if you have something like Stella and then like a Pax as well as an exosister in hand, it's important to know like what you're losing to, right? Because if you only have packs, you don't lose to either Valor or Imperm. So you can try to bait those out, maybe if you have like the ability to like make a second rank 4, right? So like if you have like a Gigabite or a Ramu, or your Armament is live because they have a monster special summon from the graveyard, you can go Pax, special summon Ellis in defense, and then Armament and try to search or like try to get a monster. But yeah, so that's really Imperm. Valor really only hurt on Stella and any of the Xyz monsters. And so how you play around it on the Xyz monsters is really simple. You either eat it or you activate Armament. Because Armament makes them lose the target, because they have to target the effect monster and then negate that effect. Imperm also is a target and negate. So if you can chain the Armament to it and then overlay into another monster, then the effect would still resolve as you would like. So yeah, that's just how you play around Imperm Valor. Really doesn't hurt this deck too much. Just thought I'd talk about it. Ash though, you can't really play around Ash too much, unfortunately. It's more or less just like, you have to hope that they don't have it. So yeah, because like how you play around Ash is you try to bait it out, and that's really it. So like you would go Stella, special Ellis, and then if you don't have the Lotus in hand, right, or packs, like these are all very hand dependent, right? So like just depending on what you have in your hand. If you have more extenders, right, that can get you into something without getting hit by an ash and without getting hit by a nib. Obviously nib is pretty popular right now. It's less popular because of brave token stuff. But yeah, so right, if you can avoid getting hit by an ash on like your Mikalace, that's what you want. And say you have like, 2 extenders in hand. I don't have any extenders, but we'll just say that these are like Gigabytes and Ranryus, right? So what you could do is you could go like special summon a Gigabyte, special summon a Ranryu. Obviously these aren't Gigabyte and Ranryu, it's just a placeholder. And then you could overlay into Caspatel, and then Caspatel effect to go search a monster to try to bait out the ash. Because you haven't used Ellis yet, that allows you to threaten a second level 4 and Stella on the board. So that's pretty interesting. That's like a good ash target for them. And if they don't ash it, then you have to pretty much go Mikalace and just try to force the ash. If you do get to add. So yeah, there's really not a ton of counterplay to ash, unfortunately. It's mostly just like small sequencing stuff. Like if you think they have ash, what are you going to do specifically? Next for Droll. Droll is pretty similar to ash, but instead of say, going boom, boom, obviously just kind of throwing monsters on board, and then going into Caspatel first. If you think they're going to be side decking Droll against you because you're searching a lot, you would go into your more important cards first, like your Mikalace. Or if you're playing like the Utopia package or something, go into Utopia double so you can search that hyper rank up magic spell. If you're playing something like the Magistus package, it's probably best not to search a Zorua if you think they're going to have Droll. So yeah, that's really all there is to it for Droll. Not a lot of counterplay. Speaking of Droll, we're going to be talking about Shared Ride. For Shared Ride, you really have a few options, right? You can either say I'm just going to special summon as many exosister monsters as possible, and then just like not give you any searches. Or you could just say I want to do a minimal search, maybe search a singular Vadis or an Armament, like depending on if you really think you need it, and then just pass. You don't want to be searching because like there's really nothing that we can do under Shared Ride, and you're just giving your opponent free pluses. I really only expect decks like Sky Striker to be playing this, but yeah. Now we're going to talk about everybody's favorite card, Scythe. So the reason that I'm specifically talking about Scythe is a weird card because it depends on how they trigger it. For a lot of decks, the best way to trigger Scythe is, of course, DPE, right? So they'll go Dagda, I forgot to put Verte in. They'll go Dagda, Verte, and then DPE, pop, Verte, pop, Scythe. Which, in that scenario, what you do, because you cannot, right, so their board would look something like this, probably, with the DPE engrave. Right, this is kind of what their board looks like. They maybe have like a Brave token thing over here. But what you're going to do in this scenario, if this is you, is you're just going to, if they have the DPE engrave, just special summon a bunch. Just like get as many monsters on the field as possible. Because this is a good setup because they have to special summon from the graveyard with DPE. It's not like they can choose not to, right? So you just throw as many of the exosister monsters on the board as possible, and you've played through Scythe. Because you're still getting the same amount of pluses next turn when they go special summon DPE from the graveyard. And then all of your effects trigger at once. You get to go into, Osophiel, Gibrine, and Caspatel, or Mikalace. Or like Osophiel or Caspatel, Mikalace, and Gibrine. So you're still getting what you would. You're just gonna be a lot further behind in tempo, which is just unfortunate. But like, don't auto scoop to Scythe in this deck specifically, especially if they're triggered by DPE. That being said, if they're triggering Scythe through some other means, Phantom Knight notably will go like Rusty, like Banish Fogblade, special summon the Phantom Knight's Breaksword, and then pop Scythe, to special summon it. In this case, you don't have anything guaranteed to special summon out of the graveyard, which is unfortunate. So how you're going to play around this is really like, you gotta either draw the out, like, hope you draw like if you're playing like a Droplet or like a Bell, you know, you gotta hope, or like a Meister, you gotta hope you draw it. You know, hopefully Nibiru them on the previous turn so they can't get set up. But that's why I have D-Shifter in here, right? D-Shifter is an interesting card. I didn't talk about it in the tech video because I'm not super sold on it yet. I try to only talk about cards that I'm like really sold on, and that I think are like really good in that tech video, or at least that I think have like some potential in that tech video. D-Shifter is one of the ones that I've seen talked about, but I'm not sold on yet. I think it needs a very specific type of build, because like it's not like this is Flunder, right, where you can kind of clean out your graveyard every now and then with like Flunderies and Stry. So I think D-Shifter is an interesting tech if you're really worried about cards like Scythe. It shuts down a lot of decks, especially if you're going second. I think it's a very interesting floodgate that we can play, because like you don't care about the graveyard too much. Like there's nothing in the graveyard when you're playing, unless you're playing like the Eldritch variant specifically, that you really care about. You know, like in the Utopia variant, you don't really want your stuff to get banished, but like you can still play without it. It just like slows your combos down a little bit. Especially in like the Magistus variant, you don't need the graveyard really. Like, and so that's why I think D-Shifter is probably an interesting card. But like, yeah, if they are getting back on track, for Phantom Knights, again, just kind of throw bodies on the board and hope that they stick really. Because like, you're really only going to be able to get 3 bodies on the board without, like, specifically like a Gigabyte, a Ranryu, or like a Magistus monster. You know, maybe a Utopic Sage or Ascended Sage, or no, it'd be a Sensei. The ZW and ZS monsters. You know what I'm talking about. Hopefully, check out the Utopia video if you don't. They're in that deck list. But yeah, just kind of like hope that you kind of like, because basically the moment they play out of their graveyard, they lose these all trigger, right, and they basically lose the ability to OTK you. So basically say like, you have to kill me this turn, otherwise I'm going to be able to play the game and like hopefully outgrind you. And that's really what you got to do when you're at Scythe. Anyways, going back to talking about hand traps. If someone does D-Shifter you, you know, just don't play out of the graveyard. Like, we're not, like I said, this deck doesn't really care about its graveyard, so it's not too bad. That's just one of the ones that I thought was interesting to talk about. For a side deck card, again, Danko Seka. Again, I'm not completely sold on this, because like, you know, you're probably playing at least one of each of these, specifically Armament and Vadis. Like, if you're not playing either, I mean, good on you for thinking that you don't need them, but like, especially Vadis, it's just so good. Especially if you can like force some graveyard interaction. So like, I'm not sold on it 100%. If they do Danko Seka you, and you're playing like a trap heavy build, just hope you have Judgment really, or like 2 or more Exosisters, because because of the attack points of these monsters, right? You cannot out this thing just by battle. So if you want to out this, you're going to need 2 Exosister monsters, especially in the Eldritch variant. Anyways, time to talk about some more hand traps. Ghost Ogre, Snow Rabbit, Ash Blossom, the Ghost Bell, and Skullmeister. So I'm gonna consider Ghost Ogre like 1, and then these 2. They basically do the same thing. Bell and Meister, like they're very similar. At least the way I see them. Like they fulfill the same purpose really. Like that's what you're looking for them to. Bell, you don't really care about, right? Because like, you're not going to be adding a card from the graveyard, and like, so whatever. Meister, you gotta like, if you're playing the Eldritch variant, this can hurt a bit, but that's about it. Just try to like bait graveyard interaction really. You know, that's just a normal way to play around it. For Ghost Ogre, it's Ghost Ogre is really all about sequencing, right? E-Telly into Ghost Ogre is a really popular combo right now, especially with all the like the 10E stuff running around, and E-Telly at 3. Ghost Ogre is becoming a really good hand trap, right? So if you have a hand of specifically like if you have a hand of like these 2 monsters specifically, right? And you know that they are on Ghost Ogre, you 100% go normal Stella, special Ellis from hand using Ellis effect. Don't use Stella effect because you will get Ghost Ogre and then you will lose. That's how it works. Like, if you have maybe a third exosister monster, you know, like if you have a let's say like a Sophia, then the equation changes significantly. However, right? Because say they go right, you know, like say they special summon Ghost Ogre to their field, right? They have E-Telly to Ghost Ogre, they shotgunned it or something. So you can then go Stella to bait the Ghost Ogre because Stella will still resolve, right? So you go Stella, Stella gets destroyed, then you can special summon the Ellis from hand and draw one card. Right? Now talking about this, let's say you don't have Stella, right? So you just have Sophia and you just have Ellis. Don't know why I clicked to attack. You normal Sophia, special summon Ellis. Don't use Sophia effect because you'd rather get Ghost Ogred on one of your Xyz monsters, which will get you to, you know, like your guaranteed value, right? Sophia is a random draw. You could draw a good card, or you could draw a bad card. You could draw a card that you need, a card that gets you out of the scenario if you get Ghost Ogred, or a card you don't. So if you don't have an extender, don't use Sophia. Be like, you know, like the question is it worth it to possibly not make an Xyz monster, right? Like if you don't draw an extender or you don't already have an extender, like if you have an extender like a Gigabyte, you know, like a Ranmu, go ahead, you know, because like then they Ghost Ogre you and they've just wasted the Ogre, because then your Xyz monster will survive. So yeah, because then you can go, oh okay, I'll just overlay, you know, I'll just overlay my Gigabyte and my Ranmu, just send these to grave. Now, okay, talking about something else, right? So let's say you've gotten here, and you're like, I'm not going to use the Sophia effect because I don't think I'll draw an Exosister monster. Like you've been through a lot of your Exosisters. Well, then you should overlay these two, and like let's say you want to search a Speller Trap, right? Here you're going to Mikalace detach, add the Speller Trap. Don't go for the Banish effect first, because if they do chain Ghost Ogre, you can then chain the second Mikalace effect to banish something. I've talked about this a lot on the VOD reviews, but I know a lot of people don't watch those, so I thought that's just something important to talk about, right? Because, you know, so again, talking about like playing around, you know, like an Imperm or like an Invaler, right? If they go, you know, like, if you go Mika, target their, like, Dagda or whatever, and then they chain like an imp, or if you go, no, sorry about that, the wrong order. If you go like Mika detach, add a spell, they chain like an Imperm or a Veiler, or like a Droplet sending like a spell, and like Mika's the only good banish target. You can chain Mika again, right? Because it's not, none of these effects are once per chain, they're simply once per turn effects, and then one of them is a quick effect on the turn you special, so you can activate it whenever. Yeah. So that's just something else I want to talk about. Playing around something like Triple Tack. Triple Tack is a really big punisher for this deck because you kind of have to activate a monster effect. So, right, there's a few ways to do this. If you think they have Triple Tack, maybe like keep a card or two in your hand, don't commit full the way, and try to get them to try to bait them into like thinking, oh, I have like a hand trap in hand. Like, you know, like if this is your hand, let me just right, like if this is your hand, maybe go like Stella special Sophia, draw one, and then like overlay search Vadis, set Armament, and try to bait them into thinking, oh, he has a hand trap, otherwise he would have extended. If they're gonna take control of a monster, just make sure that you use the Mikalace or the Gibberine effect. Like just like don't let them get the spell engrave if they care about that, you know, because it doesn't matter who, because it is a negate, it doesn't matter who owns it. Same with like Mikalace, it is a banish, it doesn't matter who owns it, so like you don't want to get owned by that. Yeah, and obviously if they draw two, just like draw the out forehead. Okay, done with those two. Now on to Dark Ruler and Droplets. For Dark Ruler specifically and Droplets, you just gotta remember that one, don't commit too hard, and two, you can chain to these with things that are not monster effects. So right, if they go droplets, send like trap, or send like spells monster, right? Then you can chain to it with like a spell, or if they go, and then you can chain to that spell with a monster effect, right? So that's what you should realize. So right, if they droplets send, like if you have a Mikalace on field that was summoned this turn, and you want to like banish whatever they dropleted for some reason, like they did like a droplet sent like silent boots or like something like that, right? You can't activate Mikalace in chain to droplets. Oh, sorry about that. But you can activate, like if they droplets, they send spell and monster. You could, hypothetically, if you really need this banish, chain a trap and then chain a monster to this trap. Same thing with Dark Ruler. Neither player can activate monster effects. You could chain a spell, though, like Armament, and then chain a monster effect, like Mika. Okay, so now we're going to talk about cards like Retaliating Sea, Evenly Matched. Obviously, this is an interesting one because you just don't want to get hit with this because, like, I mean, okay, here's what if you think your opponent has Evenly Matched, right, shotgun the Armament before the battle phase, right? Because if it gets to the end of the battle phase, you chain Armament to Evenly Matched, and you summon like Exosister or Osophiel. Osophiel does not get to trigger because it needs to still be there on a new chain, right? So if you go like, so if you then like banish face down Osophiel, you cannot activate Osophiel because it's not in its trigger location. I think that's the specific ruling, but like I just know that you can't activate it because of how the Evenly Matched works, right? It's like if you right, it's like if they activate, like if your opponent activates Ray and you chain DPE and pop the Sky Striker monster that your opponent summoned, they don't get to activate that Sky Striker monster's effect if it was like a Kagari. So, you know, it's that ruling. You've probably seen it or heard it before. So if you think they have Evenly Matched, when they go into battle phase, just shotgun the Armament on this and just be like, you know, Osophiel, you know. If you don't have any good targets, if you're like, you know, I want to, right, because like this, okay, let's say you, right, like if it's evenly matched for one, you can't really do anything here, like just maybe you like, I need to conserve resources in the extra deck, then whatever, right? Then just like keep the Vadis if you have it, because the Vadis is like a guaranteed way to like make your opponent play differently. Yeah, so that's really all you can do against evenly matched. Just like you make sure you're paying attention to when they activate when they go into the battle phase. If they like also, you know, if they crash into you during the battle phase, you know, they have like a 1300 attack monster into your XZs and they have nothing left, it might be worthwhile if you're like, you know, they went second, they might have an evenly matched. So Nib. Unfortunately, in this deck, there is no good way to play around a Nib, because both Magnifica and Utopic Draco Future require you to have summoned 5 times, right? Because you're going to go Stella, Special, Special, and then you're going to special this like last monster out of deck with like packs or something, right? And then to make both, you have to go, this is 4, by the way, and this is number 5. So yeah. Right, so you don't have a good way to play around Nib. If you're really worried about Nib, just go 3 summons pass, right? Because that's really all you can do. You can maybe go 4 summons pass if you draw like a hand of like 3 Exosisters, specifically like Ellis, Stella, and like, you know, a Sophia or something. Because then you could go normal Stella, special Ellis, and then special summon Sophia, and Sophia draw 1. And then that's 1, 2, 3 summons. And then your 4th summon would be into a Mikalace. Mikalace, search this Vadis, and then end your turn. If you're really worried about Nib, that's probably the best route. Finally, another card that you might see, because I know B troopers are popular, and like it is a level 4, so if you have some of these and you're like, I need an extra deck slot, or like you need an extra slot to fill, this is okay, honestly. It's pretty good against like the Brave stuff. So basically, we don't really use spell cards that summon a monster, but except for Vadis and Armin, right? So if you're worried about this card, like you're playing Beat Troopers, just be careful about how you're using Vadis and Armin. It's only a macrocosmos, so it's like whatever. And that's about it. Yeah. Then just going through all of these real quickly. It just depends on what you have. If you're playing more combo oriented, you might want to play like an evenly dark ruler thing, just because of how like it just depends on what you feel comfortable with, obviously. Talking about like what you want to play in exosisters. I don't personally think that stuff like Nib is very good because of the stuff like the Brave tokens. I'm personally more of a fan of going second equalizers, because especially cards like this, they just stop the Brave token engine in its tracks. Obviously, people have a way to play around that, like Scythe, and that's like you'd have for Droplets early, and evenly matched doesn't really do anything. D-Shifter and Retaliating Sea, I think specifically, are good, interesting tech choices that I'm like looking into more. I plan to make another tech video, so you'll be seeing that hopefully eventually. Something like Danko Seka, it's a light level 4, so Ghost Ogre, also just a light level 3, pretty good hand trap too. So if you're playing like a Gozen and you want to like include like a Hulk shenanigan, you got that. Other than that, you've probably noticed I prefer these going second equalizers to hand traps generally, just because I think they get more value most of the time, especially in a deck like this where like you really need to set up. Yeah, anyway, that's about it for me. Have a great day, guys.